Welcome to Software Testing Unleashed, the podcast for testers, developers, and test automation engineers, and all the people in the software development process who want to create great, amazing quality software. My today's episode was recorded at Testwarez, a great testing conference in Poland. The days were full packed with great quality content, and I had a great time discussing and chatting with the Polish and the international software test community. If you haven't been here, you should definitely go to one of the next Testwarez conferences. You find a link to the conference in the show notes. My guest today is Maciej Kusz. He was the program chair of the Testwarez in this year and has about nearly 20 years of experience in testing and test automation. And that's also part of our talk today. We talked about Playwright and especially why it is sometimes better not to use TypeScript but to use Playwright with Python or other programming languages. And now enjoy the episode. Hi Maciej, great to have you in the show here.
Nice to have you also here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. You're a very well-known person here in the organization and in the doing the program.
I try to be very open for the people and for the community. This year I'm head of the program committee for the Testwarez conference. But previous years I was also part of the program committee for other conference, which was called Conselenium. This year they do rebranding. This is Tada from this year. So I kind of know how to organize it from the perspective of the program committee. I'm also a creator of the meetup in Silesia area called Ślązaczka. So yeah, I know a little bit about that. Yeah. And I'm also very active in commenting others people materials on the online and so on. And we have very big, let's say, community on the Facebook. We have the group called Testowanie oprogramowania, which is translatable as software testing. And that community in Poland is like 55,000 people right now. So it's very huge community. And whenever somebody asks question, I know how to answer. I try to be the person to answer for that. So a lot of people knows me. And because of the conference, meetups and so on, I know quite a lot of people that are
good connected to everyone. Yeah. And I saw in the agenda of the program, your talk was about Playwright and debunking some myths about it. And I said, this is a great topic to put in here into the podcast too, because Playwright is now very popular. It was the subtitle was that it's not just a TypeScript.
Yeah, exactly. For some perspective, I'm using Playwright with TypeScript for last 1.5 years, but previously for almost the same period of time, I was using that with Python, and I'm very well known to be Python guy because I'm using Python for like 14 years or something like that. So I have quite a lot of knowledge about Python, libraries in Python, frameworks, and so on. And I was trying to show in the presentation that you don't have to use Playwright only in TypeScript. It has some benefits, of course, but you are also able to use that framework also in Python, but you have to use some additional plugins for PyTest framework to have almost the same functionality.
Okay. So maybe we can go into this comparison. So what are the differences for using? I think most people will use TypeScript and don't even think about that using Python for that.
Okay, so the biggest difference for those two languages, maybe not even the languages itself, but Playwright is built and created in TypeScript. So this is one of the biggest advantage. And Python version is just adapter for the TypeScript version, let's say. So any new things that came to Playwright came first in TypeScript language. So it's one of the benefits. Also, there is other aspect that nobody, maybe not so many people try to see is that Playwright originally, when it was created for JavaScript and TypeScript, they didn't have very good base as for test runners. So they created Playwright test library in NPM as a set or combination of not only library that can click or interact with the browser, but also to integrate their own creation of the test runner. And Playwright TypeScript version of Playwright is considered to be most complete when you want to start to build the test automation. It's the easiest start because you have everything integrated at once. So it's quite easy to start. For the Python version, they didn't go the same approach because Python already has the library called PyTest. That was very, let's say, to be considered standard library for building test frameworks, not only for testers, but also for developers. And it was very good base to start from, so they didn't have to create their own test runner in Python version. And because of that, there is a lot of differences. The path of those two languages came, let's say, split. And because of that, we have a lot of differences. Because one of the example, TypeScript, JavaScript documentation for Playwright is complete. For Python version, you have only the documentation for methods that interact with the browser, but you don't have the documentation for PyTest because PyTest has already its own documentation that is complete. So because of that, a lot of people have when they open the documentation, then they see that for Python there are some aspects that are missing, but they are not missing because they are in other place. So you have to be aware of that. And when you know about it and you have some experience in Python and you know PyTest library, you know that a lot of functionality of TypeScript version can be achieved in PyTest, but you have to add some additional plugins for PyTest, and then you can compare those two, let's say, versions.
What do you think? What would be, or what is your motivation to use the Python version?
Okay, so for me, Python is a little bit better language for testers. Why? TypeScript is mostly, and JavaScript are mostly connected with web browser or web development, yes? And Python is very flexible language. You can test not only web applications, you can test any hardware, you can interact with the infrastructure very easily because there is a lot of libraries for that. You can do performance testing, you can do a lot of things. So when you want to do some kind of testing activities or create test automation, it's very easy to start in Python because you can choose anything to test, to be tested by that language. In TypeScript, you don't have such flexibility. So I consider Python better language for testers. Unfortunately, because there is a lot of web development and a lot of projects nowadays are web-based projects, and you have the front-end team that already knows the JavaScript or TypeScript, it's quite often easier to start test automation of web applications in TypeScript.
Yeah. Okay, so the different approaches and different motivations behind that. When we go to the Playwright part, and you said there's a lack of documentation, maybe not a lack, but it's on another place with Python. What are for you at the daily practical work, the benefits of using Python in the combination with Playwright?
How to answer that question? Python is a little bit easier because it's easier to start. Also, Python by default is synchronous language. You don't have this await, async, and so on stuff that you have on the JavaScript and TypeScript stuff. And because of these premises and so on, it's a little bit harder also to debug the TypeScript version. Of course, in Python, you have async, await, and so on, and you are able to even write the test that way, but you have to add another plugin to PyTest, but you don't have to. So whenever you start to automate and debug tests in Python, it's easier, despite the fact that in TypeScript version, you have the additional plugin for VS Code, for example, dedicated for Playwright. But this plugin doesn't give you a lot of things, and you can achieve it purely in Python and directly in debugger. So you don't have this additional plugin on the TypeScript side.
Yeah.
So there are pros and cons, depends how many knowledge you have for Python or TypeScript. If you already know TypeScript, choose TypeScript. If you know Python and PyTest, use Python version.
Are there any things which can be achieved in only one of the Python or the TypeScript part?
Okay, so if you consider to create visual regression testing, it's easier and probably more stable in TypeScript version because it's already integrated in the framework with the test runner, and you have all the methods. In Python, you have to use some external libraries. They are kind of outdated, not longer maintained or actively maintained. And also, if you want to create, let's say, fancy reports, in TypeScript version, you have them out of the box. You have this for visual testing. You have these nice pictures before, after, what is the difference, and so on. In Python, you have to create it by yourself. You have to use, for example, Allure framework for creating the reports. So it's a little bit harder. It's achievable, but a little bit harder. There are also some aspects regarding the applications you can test. There are some applications built on Electron that are possible to be tested by the TypeScript version. And Electron application, if you don't know, those are the desktop application that in fact inside have the web application built in, let's say. In Python, you are not able to test it. In TypeScript version, there is possibility for that. I didn't do it, but there is possibility for that. Also, there are some aspects regarding mobile, let's say, version testing of the application under the test that are possible to be tested in TypeScript version, but are not in Python. Also, there are kind of tendency nowadays to test web components created by the developers. And because web components are JavaScript or TypeScript, then you have the possibility to test them in TypeScript version of the Playwright, not in Python, because Python cannot use those components. There are more or less the main differences.
And is there something which can much better be achieved with the Python version?
I don't think so, to be honest. If you are skilled in Python and you have the knowledge about PyTest and plugins, it's possible to recreate the functionality of TypeScript version, but you have to spend some time to integrate those plugins, configure them, and so on. So you have to spend some time at the beginning, but later on it will work more or less the same. But you need to spend some time and have some skills.
And if you're experienced with Python, you're staying in your ecosystem, so it's I think easier to work on a longer way than to relearn things for TypeScript also.
Also, there are a lot of additional tools that can help you create the Python version of test to be more comparable to TypeScript one. For example, TypeScript is superset for JavaScript. You have those types in language. In Python, by default, you don't have types. You can use them, but runner or compiler of Python, don't consider them. You have to use external tools to validate or lint code, and you have the possibility, but again, you have to use external tools or have a knowledge how to integrate that. In TypeScript, you have it by default because of the compiler of the TypeScript into the JavaScript. So, yeah, again, you need to have some additional knowledge and skills about Python and how to use types in Python. And if you use types, and I highly recommend that, the differences between the code written in Python and the one written in TypeScript, considering Playwright, they are very similar.
Yeah, I understand. What about the community support? So I think TypeScript, Playwright, they have their community. And is there also a community I can ask if I have questions about the Python thing?
To be honest, I didn't consider that. Even I didn't look for that. Nowadays, there is a lot of things that AI can translate from one language to another. So if you're looking for some answer and you find that answer in TypeScript, there is ChatGPT translated to Python, and because the code is very similar, it will just work. So you don't have to look for that community, and I think simply you don't have to look for that.
Yeah, so you don't need your Reddit or Stack Overflow. You can just go to ChatGPT and use that. One question, maybe one level above, is because you are aware of the test automation stuff so well. Why is Playwright so successful nowadays? And when I see the former times where we used Selenium or Cypress, and a lot of people are going away from Selenium and Cypress to Playwright. Why is that?
I think there are a few aspects behind that situation. First of all, Selenium is very hard to maintain stable tests because of the weights. In Playwright, there are auto weights that solves that out of the box, so you don't have to build a lot of your own creation solution for waiting for the element to be in specific state like you are doing that in Selenium and so on. This is one aspect. So stable tests are easier to be achieved in Playwright than it was in Selenium. Second aspect could be tooling, because in Playwright you have this code gen. In ancient history of Selenium, you have this Selenium IDE that allows you to achieve almost the same, but it wasn't supported. A lot of people didn't use it, and so on. And CodeGen can speed up creation of the tests very, very well. Also, there are some additional tools built into Playwright, like Inspector and Trace Viewer, that allows you to debug visually what was happening during the test. Like before clicking the element, what was the state of the web page or something else? What was happening in the network, how the requests were sent and received, and so on. So you have a lot of tooling around Playwright built into Playwright that helps you with creating the test, debugging the test results, and so on, that Selenium didn't have and don't have nowadays also. So I think those are the two aspects of that. Also, one is for installing the proper version of the web browser. In Selenium, in the past, it was hard. There were some additional libraries that allows you to maintain the proper WebDriver version to the proper web browser version and so on. In Playwright, it works a little bit different, because if you install Playwright in specific version, you are also installing as a dependency specific version of the web browser. It has some cons because you are not able to test your application against specific version of the web browser. So it's a little bit harder, but because of that, it's simpler to start again. So I think those three aspects are the main reason that Playwright is gaining so much traction nowadays.
Yeah. That's what I see at my clients too, because they are all dealing now with how to get to Playwright, and they like the easy support and all the
also
tools
Playwright nowadays has this MCP integration for kind of AI addition for the testing and so on. So this is something that is starting. Not, I think with AI part of in testing is still to be stabilized, let's say, not only in Playwright but in general. But it's another topic for another discussion.
Yeah, that's also a huge topic. Yeah, Maciej, thank you very much for being here in the show and to share your insights for the comparison, and not just to use TypeScript but also Python for Playwright. I think that could inspire some of the Python knowledge people in the podcast maybe to take a look at this too, to use it there and to make some progress there with the test automation.
Yeah, so, it would be good that if you want to use it, consider and try it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. We will put your contact details also in the show notes. Maybe someone will get in touch with you and ask some questions, or you.
Yeah,
so we will see. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the invitation again.
Yeah. Thank you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.